Hey guys, it's Mathil here, and today I kind of wanted to talk about the nature of wanding, and in particular, Phys wanding. So the title of the video is basically there is no such thing as a Phys wander, and it's a bit clickbaity, but what I'm trying to say is there is no such thing as a pure Phys wander. Like, you're not really scaling Phys in the natural sense that, say, swords, axes, claws, daggers, whatever, are doing. You're doing it in a way that kind of encompasses everything as a whole, not just physical side of things. So of course you can be more of a Phys-like scaling wander in that you use a physical wand. So this is about as good as a physical wand as you can get on some kind of a budget. It's got 180 physical DPS, which is pretty decent, but even with that and all these sort of like physical nodes, like you take these, this one, that one, that's about all the physical nodes there are for wanding on the tree. Aside from, just generic physical nodes, it's basically that. And what it comes down to is every other wanding node is essentially damage. So it increases damage here and attack speed, accuracy, damage, 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 damage. But then of course you have nodes like this, which scale your damage based off of your physical converted to lightning. But then that lightning is going to get affected by things like weapon elemental damage and crown of eyes and whatever. But same with this. That also gives you some extra physical to cold and physical to fire. Now most other weapon specializations don't have something like that. So they usually just scale their damage as much physical as possible, for example, yeah. So just pure physical, and then the only conversions you really get are through gems, like Hatred or Added Fire or Phys to Lightning, but you don't actually have any like natural conversions like you do with wands on the passive tree. So because of increased damage, because of the nodes like these, you kind of end up being just always a hybrid wander. You never become pure physical, you're almost always dealing much, much more elemental damage than you are physical. Physical is of course the strongest type of damage, so it's still quite beneficial and in your best interest to get a physical wand for pretty much any wand build. It's just that they're expensive, hard to roll, and hard to come by. But if you can, it's almost always worth it. But what this brings me to is why Wrath is so much better than Hatred. So I've been playing Wander for the past few days, and a lot of people are telling me, you're a Phys Wander, you should be using Hatred, shouldn't you? Like, they're not certain, but they're asking, and naturally so, they think that since you're using Phys and scaling Phys, Hatred should be a lot better than Wrath, because that's how it is for most other builds. Now this Hatred's only level 12, but use your imagination. At level 20, it's another 5% Phys converted to cold, and Hatred gets completely dumpstered by Wrath. And that is, as I mentioned, because of all the scalings of general damage. So you got your projectile damage, you got your damage nodes here, you got weapon elemental damage, as well as just some elemental damage bits and pieces here. So in the end, my Wander has almost all of its damage scaling to everything, not just physical. And on top of that, I'm wearing a Crown of Eyes, which gives you converts your spell damage to attack damage. So it essentially converts your spell damage into, let's just say, projectile damage for the sake of this exercise, which applies to both the Phys and the lightning portion. So in conclusion here with Wrath, I'm sitting at 28k DPS, I take off Wrath, now I'm sitting at 22k. So Wrath is 6,000 on my DPS, which is roughly something like 20% of my damage. If we then turn on Hatred, I get 2,000 damage. That is, what, 4,000 less than Wrath? It's like 30% of what Wrath does. Now, as I said, it's not the max level, so give it another 5%, use your imagination, it gets up to maybe 25k. So the problem is we don't have that much Phys to convert to cold, whereas the lightning gets scaled by everything else, and that's basically why Wrath just so much better than something like Hatred. Likewise, Added Fire, I was originally using this, again, not that high level, only Level 9 gets another, what, 10% or so damage at the max level. Use your imagination just a bit again. There's not much I can actually do to show this, but it's really quite terrible compared to something like Added Cold. So I'm using Added Cold in my Frenzy instead of Added Fire now, because the conversion is just so low on the amount of Phys you do compared to the large amount of cold you just gain there, and then it gets scaled by everything like projectile damage, elemental damage, as well as things like weapon elemental damage. This also scales your just flat damage like this. So I can kind of show it. 63k completely unbuffed. I'll take out Wed. I'll take out Added Cold. So in the end, here we are, 32k right there. Put in Added Cold, 43k. Put in Added Fire, 36k. So Added Fire barely adds anything. Granted, they both get boosted by Wed by a similar amount anyway, so it's not going to make a difference having other gems. But that's why basically flat damage is so much stronger for every type of wonder. Physical, non-physical. You're going to want flat damage instead of conversion damage like this that's based off of your Phys. Likewise, Added Lightning, I now have it in my setup. It's a large portion of my damage. Take it out, I lose 8,000 DPS there. It's absolutely colossal. So that's between Added Lightning and Wrath, that's almost all of my damage. That's half of the damage anyway. And that's just Wrath and Added Lightning. Now that comes, as I said, because of all the scalings you get. So you get all kinds of just things that scale your flat damage, which is why, while I have Wed on my rings and belt, belt obviously I can't do anything about, but on rings you'd much rather a huge lightning roll or a huge Phys roll paired with a lightning roll than just Wed. It's what I've got and it still works fine, but you'd much prefer some flat lightning, or just flat damage. It ends up being much stronger. Likewise, if you start going low life and you want to throw another aura in, Anger's going to be much better than Hatred. Hatred's only something you fit in at the very end. If you have both Heralds, Anger, Wrath, and you still have room for some god knows reason, if you're low life with just huge amounts of reservation, then you can throw Hatred in as well. Or if you have something like a Mirrored Wand. Potentially, if you have a Mirrored Wand, Hatred starts doing some serious work and actually getting you closer to the damage values that Wrath is going to give you, but that's not for most of us to really worry about anyway. And then lastly, that brings me to why Pizza Cutter Piscators is actually so average as a wand. Now you might look at it and think, holy crap, 100% extra elemental damage, and you'd be right, it used to be good, and on the surface it still looks great, but it's really not that good because you don't get that much flat damage anymore. So you'd much rather a wand with 3 good flat damages. Pretty hard to get, so don't compare it to a Piscator's really, since this thing's just about free. But the point is that this is not going to carry you all the way to the tippity top. You kind of want flat elemental damages. Piscator's only ends up being really good if you have mad scaling through Wrath, Anger, the Heralds. If you're using lots of static electricities, I just have one here. If you have a lot of flat damage, that's when Piscator's becomes good. Because the problem with it is we have so much general damage and so much Wed already that what's another 100 compared to actually getting some flat damage and then getting that flat damage scaled by everything you already have, as opposed to adding 100% damage to, well, what? If you're not using lots and lots of auras, lots of flat damage, Piscator's really doesn't do much. So in this scenario, I do use a fair bit, and because I have a fairly decent Wrath, I got a good Herald Vice, and I'm also using Added Lightning, Piscator's isn't too bad. It does give a fairly substantial amount less DPS, 5,000 in this case. Cuts out all my Phys, which is obviously the best part of my damage. But yeah, it's really quite underwhelming. So even this Several Chaos Wand here, pretty sure should be much stronger. It's 2,000 DPS more, and it gives me a lot of Phys. This is the wand I was using for quite a while. It cost me like 4 chaos. They're really quite cheap. It was 150 PDPS, I think. Not too hard to come by. Should do a lot better than a Piscator's. So keep in mind, only use something like a Piscator's if you have a lot of auras and a lot of flat damage. And for one cast, it's still not bad. It'll still do some good work, but bear in mind, it's not the be-all, end-all, even for elemental builds. So I hope that cleared up some of the misconceptions about wanding builds and what exactly you should be using when building a wander. So Hatred, pretty much a no. Added Fire, pretty much a no as well. In conclusion, no such thing as a Phys wander. Just because you do so much elemental damage, you can build more to the Phys side of things and scale through Phys, but at the end of the day, you're pretty damn hybrid no matter what. There's not much you can do about it. I hope this didn't have too much misinformation and actually helped you out a bit, and thanks for watching. See you guys next time.